Good evening, everyone. And it's always great to be with all the C.R.E.A.T.E community. We enjoying the discussion that we had every time we have the webinar about research, question about research, learning about research, discussing challenges about research and how to overcome these challenges through continuous education in research. Today, I'm very sad to say this is the last webinar before the summer. And we thought that before we go to summer, and we want to leave you with some sort of guidelines and flow chart of how to do research and research, how to apply for research ethics approval, so that if any of you would like to think about doing any research during the summer, or if start any sort of research, they do have all this information in their hands. For everyone who attending C.R.E.A.T.E, I'm Bashair Musa. I'm very, we've been doing this for a long time, so I'm not going to waste time talking about myself, but it is a great honor for me to take a lead of this initiative. And I'm very happy every time I'm here with the C.R.E.A.T.E community. It's very important for me every time we meet to remind myself and everybody else this is one of the very successful collaborative projects between Emirates Diabetes Endocrine Society and University of Sharjah. We've been running two phases and 12 today, our 12th webinar. We are very grateful to University of Sharjah and to all the teams of University of Sharjah. And also we are very grateful to Emirates Society, Emirates Diabetes and Endocrine Society. A special thanks to Prophet Hiya and all the team who's been helping us every single time we deliver any webinar. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your support. Regarding today, right now we are live streaming. If you have any thoughts, question, or feedback, please share it with us in the QA chat box. After we finish the webinar, I would be very happy to discuss this with our amazing speaker today. Also, we have the webinar. It's on demand and it is available in the Emirates Diabetes and Endocrine Society Institute. It's very important to know that by the end of today, you will be finishing the group of 6 webinars and you will receive an evaluation form. Once you fill that form, you will be able to get the CME point because, as we all know, C.R.E.A.T.E is CME accredited. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Metha. I think anybody who's doing research in UAE, either you are in Dubai or in any other Emirates who doing multi-center study, definitely somehow you talk to Dr. Metha. She has more than 20 years experience in clinical research. She's been actively involved and heavily involved in Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, operation-wise, governance-wise, and coordinating all the research in the DHA. It's very important always to meet the person that will be able to help you. She's dealing with research applications, research questions every single day. And we are so grateful for her to be with us today. She has a massive experience in regulatory affairs, clinical trials, and governance. We really appreciate you, Dr. Metha, and thank you very much for being with us today. Today, she will be talking to us about research ethics in DHA, protecting participants, promoting trust, and advancing sciences. Just a small note, due to special circumstances, she won't be able to turn the camera on, but for everyone who wants to see her, this is her, the photo is here. And yes, the floor is yours, Dr. Metha. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bashair, and welcome everyone. Good evening. Let me just share the slides so we can begin with the presentation.
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, just.
It's okay. Take your time.
Yeah. Okay, something went wrong. Can you see the slides?
It's coming. I think it's loading. Yeah. Yeah. So just make it in the presentation. Now we can see it, but not in the presentation
Yeah,
mode. Yes.
it's coming. Yes, I clicked on
Yes.
the presentation.
Sure. Great.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we can see it.
Okay, let me just
Yes.
move window. Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Bashir, for the introduction, and good evening to everyone and welcome. My name is Medha, as Dr. Bashir briefly introduced, and I'm working in the DHA. As Dr. Bashir mentioned, I do have 20 plus years of experience, and I was privileged enough to work in different fields of the research. And I always think that when I was working, I needed somebody who can share their experience. So I'm glad that today I have this opportunity to share my experience with all of you. Today's topic, as you can see, is research ethics in DHA, protecting participant, promoting trust, and advancing science. I'm hoping by end of today's session, we all will understand the research ethics, because every time I'm presenting, I understand it better every time I do this. So in today's webinar, we'll discuss about why Research Ethics Committee, or what is the role of the local IRBs and Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, what are the principles of research ethics, why research ethics matters, and how the research is reviewed within DHA by Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, and some of the common mistakes that may lead to the delays of an approval by any of the IRB or the committee. Whether you are an experienced researcher, I assume most of you are, who have already conducted the research, or you are a budding researcher who is new to the research field and planning to conduct the research ethics applies equally to all research involving the human participant, human data, or the human samples. So let me ask a question, that what makes the research ethical, or what is a research ethics? Is it something we do only to obtain an approval from the local IRBs or the institutional review board or the central committees? Is it just an obtaining the regulatory approval? Or it is just, I want to publish the research in an indexed or the high impact journal, because as you know, all these journals have the ethical requirements to be fulfilled. Or is it something you want to follow the local regulation so you'll not be in trouble? But when you ask me, the answer is much broader. The research ethics is about respecting the people who place their trust in you when they participate in the research. Every participant or the subject, which when we use the term, volunteers their time, they share their personal information for the research purpose, or if there are any research procedures, they undergo those research procedures as per the approved protocol, because they believe that they are contributing into improving the healthcare or the advancement of science. So why it matters? The research ethics protects the research participants. It helps to protect their privacy and confidentiality. It helps them to help everybody to protect their right, dignity, scientific integrity, and the public trust. When we talk about the research ethics, I'm sure that most of you must have heard about the historical lessons or the mishaps that took place in the past. Unfortunately, the research ethics developed based on the history, which taught us very painful lessons, such as the Nazi experiment during World War II, or Tuskegee syphilis study, or the thalidomide tragedy, that showed what happened when the scientific advancement without an ethical safeguard. These incidences led to the international ethical framework, such as Nuremberg Code in 1947, Declaration of Helsinki, as well as the Belmont Report, and finally ICS-GCP, which is International Conference on Harmonization and Good Clinical Practices. Every ethical requirement we follow today exists because someone, somewhere, sometime suffered when those protections did not exist. When we talk about the ethics and ethical principle, the Belmont Report helped us to identify the core ethical principles. This modern research ethics build on these three fundamental principles, starting with the most foundational principle, which is respect to the person. As the name itself suggests, this principle is all about respecting your research participants and making sure they're treated fairly and respectfully. If you ask me the practical term for this, that means obtaining an informed consent from the participant. Every participant has a right to make an informed decision. They have every right to withdraw from the study during any phase of the study, may it be at the beginning, middle, or the end. And they have every right to know about the risk, benefits about the study, or what risk involved in the study, and most importantly, how their confidentiality of the data is protected. The second ethical principle talks about the beneficence. What do you mean by beneficence? In simple word, the researcher must make sure they maximize the potential benefits through the study while making sure they are minimizing any foreseeable harm. In practical terms, we can say that benefits could, such as advancing the knowledge, improving the health of the outcomes, or provide the educational value. How we define the potential harm? The potential harm can be a physical harm, which may have caused because of the participation in the study, any kind of psychological harm. Many of the studies involve such kind of tools which can lead for the participant to have a psychological harm. Social harm, maybe participating in specific study, make them isolated or affect their social life. Or economical harm, like some of the studies, if they participate, it may affect their financial income. This is how we define the potential harm. So when we talk about the beneficence, what researchers should do, the researcher must identify the potential risk and make sure there are suitable provisions are made to reduce or to eliminate the risk throughout the study. The final principle, or the third principle of the ethics, is justice. The research should fairly distribute both the benefits and burden. That means the participant selection should never exploit the vulnerable group, which I will be defining in coming few slides. And they should not be unfairly exclude the people without the scientific justification. That means when you are setting up the inclusion and exclusion criteria, how important is the inclusion criteria? At the same time, the exclusion criteria is also important. And sometimes as an ethics committee, we do ask for the justification for excluding specific group of the participant. Whenever the researcher is uncertain about these ethical issues, they should ask one question: do my decision respect the participant? Does this minimize the harm? Or is it fair for this participant to be in this particular research which you are planning? When we talk about the ethics, is it something which we do only when we are doing the IRB submission? Or is it only when we do conduct the study, or when we are finished the study and now planning a publication? So ethics doesn't begin with only the ethics approval or ends with the publication. It is a continuous responsibility. That means before the study, you have to make sure your study have a sound methodology. It has a scientific validity. You define the risk to benefit assessment, and there is an approval. When I say approval, it's a pre-approval from the relevant ethics committees is in place. When we talk about the ethics during the study, it focuses on informed consent. That means using the validated or valid approved consent form, making sure the consent is a detailed process, making sure the privacy and the protection of the patient data or the participant data, protocol compliance. When we say protocol compliance, that means abiding to the protocol which is approved by the ethics committees, the safety reporting, and the confidentiality of the data. When you complete the study, does your responsibility for managing the ethics finish? No. After the study also, it is your responsibility to continue through a secure data management when you're collecting data and doing the analysis. Then you need to have a transparent reporting when you are writing your manuscript. And you should be responsible for publication, making sure the journal what you're choosing it's an indexed high impact journal. Now let's talk about the informed consent because it plays a very important role when it comes to the research ethics. Is it something more than a signature? Yes, one of the most important ethical requirement is informed consent. Even in our committee, we give most of our time to review the informed consent to see the ethical aspects are covered by the researcher. As you know, all the committees follow the international guidelines of clinical research. We do have elements specified by DHA as well. There are 11 to 13 elements which every informed consent must contain. So when I say informed consent, is it just taking signature on the form? No, it is not. It is a detailed process. It is a conversation. Participants must understand that why we are doing the research, why they're involved, what is the risk and benefits, and they have every right to withdraw at any time. This statement must be present in every informed consent. They need to have the information on how their data will be protected, how their data will be secure, and who will have the access to that data, such as the regulatory authorities. They can access the data, such as the sponsors. If it's a company sponsored study, the monitors come to validate the data. So this also need to be declared to the participant through the information sheet and consent form. And the opportunity to ask the question. This is very important. The consent process should be interactive. It should not be one way where the researcher is explaining the information to the participant and participants are the LAR or legally acceptable representative are signing the consent. So when we review the DHA on behalf of the DHA, when we go at the site inspection, we do look into the consent process recorded in the medical record. So when we say the participants signs the consent, that means they agree. But if we don't have any of this supporting information, so sometimes we say the participants who sign without understanding, that means in the source information, if we don't find any questions or statement by the researcher that the consent process took place and so date, we can believe that it is not a true consent provided by the participant. The next point, very valid point and important point, is the privacy and confidentiality. The participant trusts the researcher with highly sensitive information. As you know, in the research study, we obtain all the identifiable information for the research purpose. But it is our responsibility to make sure you're protecting this information because it is required by the ethical and the legal obligation. How you do that, how you protect the information, you should always make sure you are using the coded identifiers. Even if you're submitting an application to the IRB or Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, you should make sure your data collection tool do not have any identifiable variable. It should be always given as a patient ID or the research ID. You should make sure there is a limited data access. When I say limited data access, that means the data is accessible only to delegate or authorized personnel from the study team and nobody else other than the regulatory authorities if required. The data should be securely stored. That means it should be under lock and key. Where the data is stored, it should be an authorized device, not your personal laptop. Making sure these are authorized device. It has a firewall, it has measures taken so that there are no viruses and then the data can be leaked. The data sharing agreement, if you have a collaborative research, you should make sure there is a data agreement, a data sharing agreement is in place so that even the research ethics committee would identify that what kind of data would be shared. Sometimes you want to do the multi-center, multinational studies with the third parties outside UAE. That time, the data sharing agreement plays an important role because there is some kind of data which is permitted to be shared and some kind of data which classified as a sensitive or protected should not be shared outside UAE. And finally, as you know, the UAE have a very strong data protection law. They have information security regulation. As a researcher, it is your responsibility to make sure this has been compliant. We'll talk about a very important topic of vulnerable population. Some participants requires the additional protection because they don't have an ability to provide a fully independent consent. This participant are called as the vulnerable participants. This can be somebody who have a language barrier, the minors, children, the terminally ill patient, prisoners, pregnant women, financially impaired or critically ill patient, and also the cognitive impaired. Their participant is not prohibited. That means the IRBs or the ethics committee don't say that you don't include the vulnerable population because they are not capable of giving the consent. Rather, we ask or advise the researcher that they must demonstrate the additional safeguard that should be in place to protect this vulnerable population. That means you should make sure your protocol clearly define the provisions you are doing to safeguard this vulnerable population. You should make sure your consent is written in a manner it will be understood by the vulnerable population. And you know that most of the cases where the vulnerable population or vulnerable participant are not able to give the consent, there must be a provision of LAR, which is legally acceptable representative. In case of LAR is illiterate and they are not able to give the consent, then as per the ICGCP, we need to have the impartial witness available to give the consent. All these definitions are as per the standard clinical guidelines of ICGCP. So if you want to explore these terms, which I suggest strongly, you must go through the ICGCP guideline. Then the question comes, who protects the research participant? Is it just a regulatory body who is responsible for protecting the participant or just a researcher? I would say that anybody who is doing the research or are the stakeholder of the research are responsible for the ethical oversight. So it can be an ethics committee or institutional review board. The ethics committees make sure they are overseeing the ethical aspects. The Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, which is a central body, we make sure there is a regulatory compliance. But at the same time, the researchers have the equal responsibility to make sure the research participants are protected. So protecting the research participant, it's a collective responsibility, and this will definitely enable a high quality research. Now I'm using the term as IRB and IC or DSREC. So I'll just take you through quickly about the slide about what is DSREC, what is our role, or what do you mean by IRB? So Independent Ethics Committee, in our case, we are Scientific and Ethics Committee. We are an independent body. We are established to protect rights, safety, and well-being of the research participant. The Institutional Review Board, this mostly a committee established within your hospital or your university, which is responsible for review and oversee of the research involving the human participant in your institution. We as a central committee receive the studies from multiple institutions or sites within Emirates of Dubai. IRB will receive only these studies which are planned in their institution. We function as a central committee for Emirates of Dubai. The IRBs mostly provide an institutional specific ethical oversight. Of course, we make sure as an DSREC, the ethical acceptability, protection of the participants, DHA regulatory compliance, and the scientific merit of the application. The equal role for the IRBs, where they focus is on the ethical review, participant protection, and the institutional compliance. We expect even the IRBs should govern by ICGCP and local regulation. Sometimes the IRBs do govern by the ICGCP and DHA. At the same time, they are abiding to the institutional policies. Now I come to Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee. It takes me a pleasure to talk about the committee. I'm part of the committee for more than now 13 years. We are a central committee for Emirates of Dubai. We are Scientific and Ethics Central Committee for Emirates of Dubai. We aim to encourage the ethical and the scientific studies related to the human well-being in Emirates of Dubai. We're not only responsible for providing an independent and timely review of the research participant involving or research participant or research studies. When we talk about the research, it's not only human subject, even human data and human sample. In addition to giving an approval, we are responsible for the additional ongoing clinical oversight, monitoring, and advice to protect the mental, physical welfare, rights, and safety of the participant in the research. We work in according to the DHA Code of Ethics. As you must all know, must be knowing the terms are Declaration of Helsinki. We work according to the Code of Federal Regulation, and we are compliant with ICGCP. We are one of those committees, we're proud to say, we are the first few committees who are registered on OHRP, which is Office of Human Research Protection. And this is our registration number. So when it comes to the DHA, DSREC responsibilities, we are responsible for safeguarding the right, safety, well-being of all the subjects with the special attention to the vulnerable subject, which I have take you through in the previous slide. We review the protocol and associated documents within a reasonable time. We have a timeline of 60 days, but most of the application finish within 45 working days. Consider the qualification of the investigator for the proposed trial. That means it's not just a study application. We look into it. We look into the qualification of the principal investigator who is submitting the application to make sure the researcher have enough experience and the knowledge in the topic of the research. We're responsible for conduct continuing review of each ongoing trial. We make sure we limit our approval only for 1 year so that the researcher need to apply for an extension by submitting a detailed study progress report. In addition to that, we conduct on-site inspection. We do have inspection criteria. As per the criteria, we select the studies amongst the one which we approved. We visit the site and we look into the compliance. When it talks about the compliance, it's not only the local compliance, but also the international OHRP and ethics committee compliance. Sometimes we request for more information, which is outlined in 4.8.10 section of ICSGCP, which is given to the subject. That means any information you are providing to the subject, may it be an pamphlet, advertisement material, that also need to be submitted to the committee for the review and approval. We are responsible to determine the ethical concerns and regulatory requirements that are addressed for the non-therapeutical trials involving the consent of subject LAR, which is legally acceptable representative. We determine the ethical concerns, the regulatory requirement for the trial prior to the consent, that is sometimes the cases where the prior consent is not possible, or the LAR, the use of LAR is not possible. We review those special cases. We review both amount and method of the payment offered to the subject to make sure that there is no coercion or undue influence on the subject. So if your study have any kind of reimbursement plan to the participant, say you are paying the participant for the so-and-so visit, or you are offering the participant some gift card or some kind of gift in order to just participate study in this need to be declared to the committee. If I can give an example, one time we received an application. In that application, the researcher, it was a very simple study where the pregnant or the postpartum women need to visit to the hospital and just answer a few questions. However, the committee observed that the participant was offered one whole year's supply of the diapers. As many of you must be knowing, for a newly mother, 1 year supply of the diaper it's a gift. So we asked the researcher for the justification because the time required to complete the questionnaire was 10 to 15 minutes at the site. So this all small minute details are reviewed by the committee. And for this particular scenario, we asked the researcher to remove this offer of gift of 1 year diaper supply, just to make sure there is no undue influence on the participant. As a final point, we ensure that the payment set forth in writing and it need to be provided to the subject in the informed consent form. That means you just don't declare it to the IRB or Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, but it need to be also declared to the participant by including this statement in information sheet and consent form. In addition to this, if you are participating any funded clinical trial or contract research with the pharmaceutical companies or CROs, even the contract clinical trial agreement, which is an agreement between the sponsor, researcher, and the institution, that also need to be submitted to the committee to make sure that sponsor is not offering the unnecessary amount of money for a researcher to conduct the study. Also, sometimes we look into the complexity of the study, and if we observe the sponsor is not providing the enough reimbursement for the investigator, because research is a tedious task, it required a lot of administrative work and a lot of time is being spent by the researcher. As you know, unfortunately, we don't have a policy on the protected time for the research. So that aspect also be looked by the DSREC, whether the amount offered to the researcher is in line with the type of the study, whether it's an observational or the complex study. I'll come to the next slide where what kind of documents required. So we follow the international requirement for the documentation submission, ICSGCP section 8. We have our administrative documents such as DSREC application form. We have a confidentiality agreement and patient information form. We ask for the scientific documents such as protocol, case report form, or any other specific study-specific documents. The investigator document, that means the resume and the GCP certificate of the principal investigator, co-investigator, or anybody who would be actively involved in connection with the participant collecting their data, and the participant documents such as detailed patient information sheet and the consent form, any recruitment material, the advertisement material, questionnaire. Here I want to highlight that as per the UAE requirement, all the participant facing material or subject facing material must be submitted in English and Arabic. And whenever you're submitting the Arabic documents, we need to have a proof on the translation of the document, and it need to be submitted in our required format. That means we do have a template for the participant information sheet and consent form, which elaborates about those 13 elements that should be present in your consent. If you want to know the detailed information about our submission requirement, you may visit to the DHA website under dha.gov.ae, medical education and research under the medical research section, or you may send an email to our central email ID, dsrec@dha.gov.ae, for asking the latest version of form or any kind of submission requirement. Now, the next slide is about the DSRC decision. So now we have submitted an application. The committee has reviewed the application. Then the following review, the DSREC may issue one of the following. The committee may approve the study. That means you're good to go after the approval. Committee may give a conditional approval with the conditions state clearly what is required to be fulfilled. Sometimes we request for the modification. We ask the inquiries for the justification or the answer of the question. And sometimes we do disapprove or reject the study. However, whenever we reject or disapprove, we make sure that we are communicating our concern to the researcher. And when we are rejecting the study, a clear reason for the rejection is mentioned in our decision letter. Sometimes the request for the modification should not be viewed as negatively, because sometimes we ask the questions to the doctor, can you change this? It has been taken that I'm a subject matter expert and I know about the study better, but as an ethical and the scientific review board, our experience matters. And whenever we give the suggestion for the researcher, this is always with the intent of having the credible study, at the end, the credible outcome. Because it's a part of strengthening both participant protection and the scientific validity of your study. Now, the next question is who should apply for DSREC? We, as a central committee for Emirates of Dubai, we receive the applications from the individuals who are working in any of the institutions governed by DHA. That means all the private and the public hospitals in Emirates of Dubai. Then the individuals from the institution that are within the jurisdiction of DHA, the university students, residents, and intern doctors. Sponsor contracted research, that means any pharmaceutical sponsored research can be submitted to us. The qualified individuals who are planning to conduct the research in the Emirates of Dubai, that means anybody from other Emirates who would like to conduct the research in in the Emirates of Dubai, they also need to apply to the Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee. The type of the request that requires the DSREC review, the research involving the prospective collection of the human data or the human specimen required an ethical, the scientific review from the DSREC. The review of medical records, that is any kind of retrospective data review from your EMR, need an ethical approval. It is not exempted by DSREC, so it need to be submitted to the committee. The studies which are planned as per the educational requirement, that means the students or who want to do the research as a part of their thesis, that also need to be submitted under the student category. Any research that involving the surveys, interviews, or the focus group. About the case series, so there is no defined guidelines that how many cases considered as a long case series. So the committee has concluded anything which is 4 or more than 4 cases, which is a long case series with the defined objectives, and the systematic data collection must also be submitted to the committee for the review and approval. And finally, the clinical trials of investigational new drug and device requires the Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee before submitting to the EDE for the final approval and the import license. We do not review the single case report. That means if a researcher want to collect a specific interesting case from the hospital, We don't review those applications. However, as a committee, we always advise the researcher to make sure there is a consent obtained from the participant or next to kin before collecting the data, and there is an appropriate administrative approval from the hospital or the study site is in place. We don't review the non-research related audit, or we don't review the audits at all. I would suggest that whenever you are in doubt, you should always consult with DSREC to understand whether this kind of studies or this kind of application requires an ethical review or scientific ethics committee review from our end. Now we'll come back to the DSREC and what is their roles and responsibility. And the next step is you understood everything. Now the question is, what is the submission pathway? As you must be knowing that many of the hospitals have started building their local institutional review board, which as a DHA we are supporting. We want the institutions to build their local institutional review board to increase the number of applications and going forward empower the local IRBs so that they can review the specific type of the studies. So when you are talking about the new research question, before that you should go and check, does your institution have a local IRB? If your institution have local IRB, at the current situation, we ask the researcher to make sure they fulfill the local IRB requirement before submitting to the DSREC. We are in the process of developing the standards for empowering the local IRB that would be published in coming few months. But until that, if you have local IRB, just make sure you comply to the institutional requirement before coming to the DSRC. If you check your institution do not have a local IRB, then a direct submission to DSREC is acceptable. So this is just a very brief pathway. As I explained earlier, you are a researcher, you come up with the research idea, you prepare your documentation, but you should make sure, does your institution have a local IRB? If your institution have a local IRB, then you go to the local IRB. Local IRB is responsible for endorsing your application. And then few of the local IRB like Dubai Health, we do have a collaboration where the documents are submitted directly from a local IRB to DSREC. Few local IRBs, we are still developing this collaboration. In that case, even though your local IRB has endorsed your application, you need to fulfill all the DSREC submission requirement and submit to us along with the local IRB approval. In case your institution do not have a local IRB, as I explained earlier, you can directly submit the application to DSREC by completing the DSREC requirement. Once the Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee review the application, we send, and we have some inquiries. We send these inquiries to the researcher. We don't send it to the IRB. So we send the inquiries directly to the researcher, and the researcher answers the queries and we review the queries. If again, sometimes the queries are major or minor. In case of the major inquiries, again, the response from the researcher go to the full committee review. If the queries are minor in nature, in those cases, the researcher do not have to wait for the full committee review. The response is reviewed during an expedited review. Once the queries are been reviewed or study has been reviewed, then we give our decision. As I mentioned earlier, it can be approved, disapproved, request for the modification. Only after fulfilling the DSREC requirement, because we do have a fee structure. You can visit our website where you understand the fee structure. If you're not sure about which category you belong to for the fee structure, again, please contact the DSREC to understand the category before you proceed for any kind of fees. Then you pay the fees if it is applicable as per your research category. And then only after obtaining and pre-approval from Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, you should begin your research. Now, I will take you through few of the challenges or the frequently encountered at the DSREC. Many of the time having an uncertainty regarding the local IRB requirement. Many researchers, they visit our website, they understand our submission requirement, and they submit an application to us. And later the institution contact us saying that this particular researcher did not fulfill our requirement. So again, going back to the previous slide, you should always make sure your institutional requirements are fulfilled before submitting the application to the local IRB. Second one, missing local IRB endorsement, that you have applied to your local IRB, but the local IRB has not yet endorsed your application and you submit to DSREC. Sometimes we are emphasizing on having a local IRB because institutional review board plays very crucial role for the oversighting of the application. If the institutional review board is not in the favor of your study and DSREC gives an approval, It may lead to sometimes the cancellation of the study if the concerns are raised by the local IRB. The next challenge is incomplete submission packages. As you know, research is a tedious process. There are a lot of documents required. You just have to make sure you stick to the documentation checklist, and each and every document which you will be using in the study, even if it's a one-liner advertisement, you should be submitting to the DSREC for the review. Incorrect submission pathway, that means submitting to the DSREC first, then local IRB, or not submitting to local IRB, or submitting to the wrong local IRB. This will result in any kind of administrative delay. Most of the time, these are the administrative delay at my level I observe. Delayed response from the DSREC queries. This is what we deal with it whenever we expedite the study, or we make sure the committee spends the time to review application and we raise the queries. After that, there is no response from the researcher. So now the DSREC has restricted the timeline of 3 months from the date of issue of the queries. If within those 3 months, the researcher do not provide the first response, the study will be cancelled and the researcher need to reapply. However, within these 3 months, the researcher provided the response, and again, we have some requeries, then this clause does not apply. Then last one is lack of awareness of the submission requirement. That is, most of the researchers who are not familiar with our process, our template, or the documentation requirement, it will always go back and forth the administrative delay to complete this requirement. The next slide is about the misconduct. So ethical research is not only about protecting participant, it's also about maintaining the scientific integrity. The fabrication, the falsification, or plagiarism undermine the public trust. So any kind of study you're conducting without or prior approval of DSREC or your relevant authority, or failing to obtain the informed consent form from the participant, also constitute as serious ethical misconduct. Again, why studies get delayed at DSREC? I'm just added this slide just to emphasize, because I have heard many of the times the researchers, they understand the research is time bound. Few of the researchers have the funding requirement, funding timeline to meet. The students have the timeline to submit their thesis. But it is very important to understand that why sometimes the submission get delayed. Most of the time it is because of the incomplete application. The required documents are not completed, or even our application form is not completed. The fields are missing. The form is not capturing the essential information which is present in the protocol. We find so much inconsistency between the DSREC application form and study protocol. You have to make sure your study protocol is well versed or well written, and DSREC form is just a tool capturing the information from your protocol. So there should be a consistency of the document. Second one, as I mentioned, missing local IRB endorsement if it is applicable for institution. Inconsistent documents, as I mentioned, the inconsistent document, inconsistent information across the document, inadequate consent form, sometimes providing the consent which is even a half page, or sometimes the providing the consent 50 pages. That is also considered as non-acceptable consent. Missing languages. As per the UAE requirement, any patient-facing material or the consent form for the patient must be in English and Arabic. Of course, the researcher can add the additional languages if their population demands the different languages. Whenever you are submitting the Arabic translation or any other languages, you should provide us the validation for those documents. And insufficient methodology details, because we do look into the scientific design of the application. This is the information until now about the research ethics and DSREC regulatory requirement. What are the forms, where you can find the forms. Now I'll take you one or two scenarios which I can share with you. There is a first scenario where the researcher wish to review the patient medical record retrospectively. Can the study start after obtaining the departmental approval only? So this is the most common, I will say, misconduct we observed in many of the hospitals or the universities who are collaborating with the hospital. Even though all the researchers who are the part of the clinic or the hospital have an access to the electronic medical record or the patient file, this does not allow them to collect the data without any ethical approval. So whenever you are collecting any data retrospectively for the research purpose in the systematic manner to obtain or achieve certain objective, this qualifies as a basic research. and the DSREC has not exempted such kind of studies. That's the reason you have to make sure, even if you are doing the retrospective study where there is no involvement of the patient, active participant by the patient, or you're not collecting any blood sample or any biological samples, only the data from the EMR, it still requires an ethical approval with a waiver of consent request, where waiver of consent must be justified. In case the waiver is not possible, you can justify by complying with the OHRP requirement for the waiver of consent, and also providing a general consent, which most of the hospitals have, the copy of general consent to make sure the statement of using the de-identified data for the future research included in your hospital general consent. If this statement is missing in your hospital general consent, in that case, a strong justification for the waiver of consent must be submitted to the Bioscientific Research Ethics Committee. The scenario 2, the study coordinator or anybody in the study team was arranging some study documents, which we expect that when you're conducting the research, you have to make sure you are filing the documents, because whenever we visit the site for the site inspection, we demand to present the consent form, the data collection tools, or any kind of material which we have approved. So this study coordinator is going through the study documents and come across a DSREC approval letter. So this is a standard paragraph we add in our approval letters, that approval for the study expires on 21st July 2026. And should you wish to continue the study after this stage, please submit the application for the renewal together with the annual study progress report no later than 30 days prior to the expiry date. And the coordinator goes and informs the PI. What should be done? The PI should continue collecting the data even though after the 21st July, even though the statement clearly states that the study approval expired. In this scenario, the PI must make sure that immediately the DSREC is contacted requesting for the study progress report, and they apply for an extension. At the moment, there is no penalty, the committee being very lenient for delayed annual report. But going forward, as a rule, DHA as a regulatory rule, if there is a delay in submitting the study progress report and applying for an extension, there are going to be penalties for not abiding to the regulation. The third one is a participant information is accidentally disclosed. Sometimes the researcher forget to remove the patient identifier from the data, or they have completed the data collection and they approach any biostatistician, and when they contact the biostatistician, they forget to remove the patient identifier, or any other kind of accidental disclosure of the information. In this case, there must be immediate reporting to the Scientific Research Ethics Committee along with the corrective action and participant protection measure, and the participant also must be informed about this breach of confidentiality. Final takeaway, I would like to leave you with the 5 key messages, or 4, yeah, it's 5, that ethics is everyone's responsibility. As I mentioned, from the researcher to the IRBs to the Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, the sponsors, the CROs, or any other stakeholders involved in the study. Participants' welfare always come first. Local IRBs, Institutional Review Board, and the DSREC work together in partner in ethical oversight. Ethical review always strengthens the research quality. Good science required good ethics. So research ethics is not just a regulatory hurdle. It is a commitment for protecting the dignity, rights, safety, and the well-being of every person who place their trust in the research and the researcher.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madha. We really appreciate that. We already received several comments about how informative and detailed the presentation is. Thank you very much for explaining
Appreciate
all
that.
these points. And as usual, we already start receiving questions. So I think interestingly, you kind of cover most of the question already. Like, some people were asking about, like what's the point that we need to pay attention to before we apply? What is the
Okay.
reason for delaying? This is one of the
Okay.
questions, delaying the application. You already covered that.
Mhm.
Somebody asked about take-home points or messages, and you already mentioned that. So I will try to just focus on the question that not maybe kind of comprehensively covered in the
Sure, doctor.
slides. So one of the question is about usually how long it takes when somebody, a researcher submitted a complete application. So assume that somebody submits the complete application. There is no any further requirement from the researcher. In general, I know it depends on many factors, but in general, approximately how much it takes.
So, Doctor, I do understand. Thank you. Thank you very much for this question first, because I know it's a very crucial question. We emphasize that research is time bound. And when we say we do time bound or we emphasize on the timely review, this is a very good question by the researcher. So, when it comes to the completed application, as a DHA or the Bioscientific Research Ethics Committee, we are trying to support as much as possible. So, lately, when we receive a completed application, we look into the risk involvement in the study.
Mhm.
If we identify or we categorize the risk as a low risk, we are
Mm,
trying to expedite the study. From past 6 months, we are successfully able to do the expedited review on weekly basis. So if your study falls into the category of low risk or less than minimal risk, it will be sent for an expedited review. However, if the study identifies the risk more than minimal risk or intervention or early phase clinical trials or any interventional clinical trial, it has to go to the Bioscientific Research Ethics Committee whole quorum, which we call a full committee meeting. So it is very important to understand when we say full committee meeting, what is the frequency of this meeting. So at the moment, the frequency of the meeting is once in a month. So in that meeting, all the clinical trials, any interventional studies, studies involving the more than minimal risk are being included. We being a central committee, you must understand that we have huge number of applications submitted. So
mm,
we are pretty transparent about your study is being added for the committee or not. We again, the members have a limited time. We try and finish as many as study possible. Like today, we had a committee meeting for this month of July. We had a meeting for 4.5 hours.
mm,
So yes, so it depends on the priority. If the researcher contact us requesting to prioritize their study because of the funding timelines, or in case of the clinical trial, and as you know, multi-center clinical trial, they have a recruitment timeline, and if you miss that recruitment timeline, the study may be dropped from the UAE itself or Dubai. In that case,
mm.
the committee do give the priorities those application, or sometimes arrange an unscheduled meeting between this between two meetings.
Sure. And just as a follow-up point, if the students are applying for the ethic approval, it will go through the same process, or there is a fast track for
So
students' application?
for the students, we understand most of the time these are the studies which are low risk. So again, it meet the low risk criteria, and we expedite the research. But again, I want to emphasize that with my experience, many of the times we receive the student application with the comment that after 2 days I have a thesis submission. So I would recommend all the students to look
Yes.
into our submission requirement, because we do have specific requirement for the students. We do have an eligibility criteria for the student. So not
Mm,
all students are allowed to conduct the research. The
sure.
eligibility criteria for the student is available on the DHA website. We have a eligibility criteria for the UAE national student, non-UAE national students, and what is acceptable in either of the case is not met. So the student need to go through the requirement, and if they are low risk study, again, as I said, it is an expedited review.
Yeah, sure. And I would like maybe to share with you and our audience today, you know, even for the graduate study, like, from our experience in the master in diabetes management, all our students start applying for ethic approval 1 year before their graduation project finish. So we'll allow 1 year. So once they finish the first year, immediately we ask all of them for the one who have some sort of requirement when it comes to ethical application, we ask them to apply 1 year before the actual deadline. So I totally agree with you when it comes to that. I receive a kind of a question again related to students. They say that our undergraduate medical students project automatically exempt from the DSREC review, or they also, even if they are undergraduate medical students, they should apply.
So, Dr. Even, so I will put it in this way that if the students are conducting the research in Emirates of Dubai and not in
Mm,
the university premise, it needs an approval, may it be for the undergraduate program or the postgraduate. If your undergraduate research study involves the general population of Dubai or involves the specific physicians from the Dubai, then it still
Mm.
requires an ethical approval. And again, it will go through an expedited review considering the risk stratification.
Okay, okay, that's great. So it's very like it's very clear, like for all the students who are asking this question, what needs to be done when it comes to that. I think there is some, as I told you, some question about what to make, the delay in the process, and we already, I think, explained that. There is a question about, like you talked clearly about the IRB when it comes to the institution or to the hospital or to whatever. So if the institution, the IRB, gave an approval or rejection, is this will influence the application to your entity? So, for example, if a researcher got an approval from the hospital where they work, and they do have the approval from that hospital, is this will make the process quicker in your entity?
So, doctor, submitting a local IRB approval or the endorsement, we say it is just a supporting document. It does not have an influence on the DSRC. If I can give an example, if we are talking about the university IRB, but we do have a cases where other Emirates regulatory body has approved the study. However, the same study is been disapproved by DHA, Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, because it's not only again the scientific and ethical review. We as a regulatory body, we have to look into the regulatory requirements set by the DHA. But again, if the study is disapproved, we outline our reasons for the disapproval. And also, if your study is been endorsed by the local IRB, it doesn't help to expedite, but only the criteria can expedite is the risk involved in the study. But it acts as a supportive document.
Okay, so we have here a question. Part of it already been answered by you, so we don't have to worry about it. But there is another question. Somebody asking it. I think it is a bit general, I would say, for you. But if you have any thoughts about it, given your experience. So the person asking about how can researchers balance between the scientific rigor and participant protection when they design a research study. I think it's a bit general, but if you have any thoughts that you want to share with the audience, that would be great.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, the role of Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee is to look into the scientific merit and the ethical aspects of the research. You always have to make sure the risk to benefit ratio is been calculated in your study. It has been explained in the study. We always say in the committee, if the study is not scientifically written well, it's not ethical. So these two aspects go hand in hand. In order to have the scientific merit, if you don't have an expertise, we advise, especially for the students, to coordinate or consult with a biostatistician who can help you to design the study, who can help you to design the sample size, because sometimes these minute factors, which actually plays an important role for getting an approval, get compromised and the committee is not able to give, even though your consent is strongly written. But if
Mm,
your methodology is very poor, or your data collection variables are very poorly designed, which we know that eventually will not give the outcome what you're expecting from the study, will
mm.
make it as a ethical failure as well. Because as I mentioned, if it's not scientifically sound, it is not ethical as well.
Yes, definitely. And I always, give this recommendation for anybody working in research, especially the young researchers.
Mm-hmm.
Please talk to other people who have experience around you.
Yes.
It is okay to share with the people that you know and you trust, to share your proposal before you submit it. Ask them for their advices, recommendation, further, like if there is any further recommendation that you can do to improve your application. This is will help you to minimize the time of the communication between you and the ethics committee. Another
Also, doctor,
question.
just to add one more point, that we are under understanding, or we understand that only if I'm doing the clinical trial, I should have an awareness about good clinical practices. I would
Okay.
suggest that each and every individual who is conducting the research involving human subject data or sample, they must take the GCP training to understand the good clinical practices and ethical concept. So I would suggest that it will help them for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And this is one of the points that I wanted to highlight. It's very important for all the researcher. If you don't have GCB certificate, please make sure that you have it as soon as possible, maybe during this summer, so that you are ready for any further kind of application when you come back from the summer. I do have a question here. A researcher asking if the patient's data are completely anonymized, do we still owe them a ethical duty regarding how their information is used?
It depends how the data has been collected. Is it a prospective
Mm,
data or you're collecting
mm,
from the medical records? If you're
yeah,
collecting the data from the medical records, you already have a waiver from the a waiver of a consent from the uh, IRBs or the Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee, and you don't go back. However, when it comes to the clinical trial, even though the results of the clinical trial, we call it CSR, that is complete case report, all the data is de-identified. The
yeah.
researcher, as per the EU requirement, need to be informed about the outcome of the research. That's the reason, as a DHA, we request all the early phase clinical trial or the interventional clinical trial to be registered on the clinical trial gov, which is an USFDA website where the patients or the participating patient can always go and check the output of that research.
Yeah, okay, that's excellent. We do have a question. This is a very interesting question. They say that there is, some researchers in UAE who conducting a research multi-center but internationally outside the country. So
Mhm.
a researcher who is here conducting a multi-center research in UAE and outside the UAE. Do the committee dealing with the external part or only the sites that within the UAE?
So I will talk on behalf of Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee. So Dubai Scientific Research Ethics Committee reviews the application, anything or any study which is planned in Emirates of Dubai at the sites under the jurisdiction of DHA. So if you
Mm,
are from the clinic or the hospital which is under DHA and you are doing this international collaboration, as per our requirement, you need to submit this application for our review and approval. Now the question is, do we approve the other multi-center sites which are outside Dubai or outside UAE? No, we don't. We are responsible only for the oversight of the sites which are under jurisdiction of DHA, but the researcher need to apply to the DSREC for the DHA site.
okay, excellent. So we're receiving a lot of comments. Thank you very much for the excellent information session. Everybody's happy about that. I think I will just run another two questions and then we'll let you go. I know that you have a family commitment. So there is one question they ask. There is if there is any one point all the medical students, they're talking about medical students specifically, should remember about like ethics, one thing that you want to share with them, they have to make sure that it's been done before they apply for the ethics approval.
Very nice question. I like it. So as a
Yes.
student, we are at the budding stage. Many of the times the things are not clear with us. So as you also advise, doctor, it's very important to discuss it with your supervisor and also to discuss or have your queries asked. Ask your queries to the DSREC for the clarification.
Mm,
Always, irrespective if you are a student, as I explained, I think one of the slide, if you are a student doing the research for the first time or you are an experienced researcher, the ethics is important at every stage at everyone. So first question you'll always ask that if you have the human participant involved, am I protecting the rights of this human participant? Am I causing any kind of harm? These ethical aspects must be considered irrespective of what is your expertise in the field of research.
yeah, and I think I totally agree with you, Dr. Fatha. Talking to your supervisor, because all the supervisors somehow they have experience in that research. So instead of just going ahead and submit your application to any of the ethical committees, please make sure that you discuss it comprehensively first before any submissions.
Doctor, can I
The,
add one point? Because
please
we
go
are
ahead.
we are getting a lot of questions from the student. With
Yes.
my past experience with the student researcher, I have
Mm,
noticed not all students, of course. Sometimes I receive the student application, and if we raise the query, we expect the students to respond because at the end it is the student researcher research. So we expect the student to be very thorough. They can, of course, discuss with their supervisor the inquiries received, but it
mm,
should not be the case where the supervisor has written your protocol and you are just doing a data collection for the study purpose. As a
mm,
student researcher, you are requiring, if when we approve the study to you, addressed to you as a student researcher, you become a principal investigator for that study and
yeah.
you holds a sole responsibility of that research. So as I said, when the DSREC raised the queries, of course, you would be discussing with your supervisor, but you should take a charge of the study after the consultation with the supervisor to make sure you are very much thorough about your study. What are you doing and
Mm.
what is your contribution in the research?
Sure. Yeah, this is an amazing, it's very important point. As a student, you have to know that I use a PI, so you applying by your name, or your supervisor is applying like for that specific study, and you will be part of it. I think it's very important to find out that. So, last question, it's about everybody's talking now about AI. So, a person asking that, do you think AI can help in, like changing the timeline of the ethics committee work or operation? Do you think it would be faster if you use AI tools, for example, than doing it by yourself, or like the team by themselves? So if there is any thoughts about AI and how this can influence the process of reviewing ethical application and kind of brings outcomes in a quicker way. Yeah.
Wow, it's a very interesting question indeed.
Yes.
In the current generation or in current time, nobody can avoid AI. We as Dubai Health Authority, we promote the artificial intelligence, we promote the use of AIs for the digital health, maybe for any kind of good use of AI. When it comes to the research ethics or using specific AI tool, if I can share some experience, even few publication journal allow to use
Yes.
the AI tools, but it
Hmm.
must be
Declared.
licensed, authorized, and declared.
Declared. Yes.
The question about using AI in ethics review, it would be so much helpful to remove or the administrative burden from the research coordinators and the committee. But at the end, when we talks about ethics, there always gonna be committee's role in judging the ethical aspects involved in the research. So AI always considered as a supportive tool, not the tool which will be used to make the judgment when it comes to the ethical aspects.
Definitely. But this is bringing another interesting point, Dr. Madhan, then we will let you go. Like what about if somebody, we know that for all the journals now, you have to declare what you used is licensed or not, and what you used it for. However, what about if there is applicants who use AI to fill in the form, for example, they have to declare that as well, or there is no clear guidelines in here?
For us, we still have a manual form, so there is not a system where you
Ah, okay.
integrate and
Okay,
so
still you need to
so that's maybe a drawback for us. We are working on
Yes.
having an electronics or digitizing the submission services. See,
Okay.
as I said, the AI is always a tool which is to be used as a supporting tool, not as something which will do everything for you. Because at the end, when it comes to the research, you hold the responsibility. AI will not hold the responsibility. If anything breach or any unauthorized AI application is used, completing the DSREC form where there are around 4 to 5 pages, it's indeed a daunting job. But what I feel with my experience, doctor, more than 25 years now, if you
Hmm.
can't complete the DSREC form, you're not able to complete the whole research process. It is a lot way to go writing the publication for the manuscript. If you can't complete one simple form, then I'm not sure how you are committed to complete the other regulatory requirement or other submission or manuscript related requirement.
Definitely. And most of the time, the investigator receive the same questions from different entity, including the ethics as well, including the journal. So, as you mentioned correctly, by doing the application very well, that by itself a learning experience.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
key point is, doctor, to make sure your protocol is well written. As I
Okay.
mentioned, DSREC application form or any other IRB application form, it is a tool which is there to extract the information from your study documents. So
Yeah.
if your protocol is well written in the systematic manner, you know the components of the protocol, most of the researcher know, the completing the application form, it is extracting and putting the information in the form.
Yeah, definitely. We can't thank you enough, Dr. How I know you had a very long day today reviewing all the applications. And on the same time, it is Thursday evening. We really appreciate your presence. Thank you very much for all this
It's my pleasure,
information.
doctor. It's my
And
pleasure.
hopefully in the future, we'll have you once again. Thank you very much and
Thank you so
have a
much.
great evening. Thank you very much, Dr.
You too, and great evening to all the participants as well. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I'll
Thank
take a
you
leave
very
now.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have just a couple of things that I want to share with you. As usual, we still running the Master of Science in Diabetes Management at College of Medicine, University of Sharjah. If you are interested in advancing your career when it comes to diabetes management and care, we run this program for 6 years now, and it has three pillars that will help you when it comes to research, to clinical rotation, as well as all the knowledge, a very holistic knowledge about diabetes. If you are interested, you want to know more, please scan the QR for the program details. And if you want to register, please do the same thing in the second QR code. So I think we do have a very interesting webinar coming next Tuesday on the 30th of June about dyslipidemia masterclass, and that will be in the same time, evening time, from 6:30 to 8:30 next week. So if you are interested, please feel free to scan now the QR code. And it is just for me, I'm getting used to meet all the C.R.E.A.T.E community to discuss something very relevant and very close to our heart, which is research. And however, this is the end of this group of webinars. I know that all of you will go for summer vacation. Wishing you a great summer vacation, and hopefully we will be able to establish or to continue a new group of webinars again about research. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for being consistent in attendance this group of webinars. And please, as we mentioned before, stay tuned for any evaluation form that will come regarding the webinar. Once you've done that, you will get the CME points. Thank you very much. Have a great night. And I would like to thank all the technical team. Special thanks to Kaplan and Superior. They've been doing a great job with us. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, everyone. Great weekend. We'll see you after summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.